Hello, creeps. It's me, John Kassir, the voice of the Cryptkeeper, and you're listening to Chronicles from the Crypt.
Hello, kiddies. It's me, Casualty Chris.
Oh, my God. Okay, this is Father Malone.
I'm going to do it every time from now on, just for you.
Right on.
And we're the hosts of Chronicles from the Crypt, a twice-a-month look at the horror anthology series Tales from the Crypt that aired on HBO from 1989 to 1996. But to be fair, you wouldn't know it aired on HBO because you can't watch it on HBO, but you can watch it on our Facebook page and you can watch it on YouTube.
That is true. And now on each of our podcasts, we do 2 episodes of the television series, and along the way we also do some tangentially related Tales from the Crypt ephemera. In between, we do bonus episodes. This is not that, but when it comes, you'll enjoy it.
So on this episode of Tales from the Crypt, we're going to be taking a look at episodes 11 and 12 of Season 5. We're nearing the end of Season 5. We're talking about Oils Well That Ends Well and Halfway Horrible. And in between our discussions of the 2 episodes, we're going to play an interview that I did with John Kassir, the voice of the Cryptkeeper and star of Oils Well That Ends Well. We're going to be talking about that episode, his time on the show, and what he's been up to lately.
What do you know? Par for the corpse. 10 billion points. Is this fun or what? Oh, hello, kiddies. Don't mind me if I'm carrying on, but I've really grown to love this game. I could goo all night. Which brings to mind tonight's terror tale. It's about a couple of game players who are about to find out what happens when you don't slay by the rules. I call it Oils Well That Ends Well.
So Oils Well That Ends Well is directed by Paul Abascal, written by Scott Nimmerfro, friend of Father Malone at one point, before he passed, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were friends, certainly.
Yeah, before he passed. Was it not what I said?
I know, but it was just a weird way.
It's a weird way to say it.
Anyway, Scott was a friend of mine, and he passed away a few years ago.
And what are you trying to say? You didn't kill him? Did you kill him, Father Malone? Is that why you're not saying it?
No, man. He got cancer. It was really bad. Okay.
Of course, it was fucking sad. No shit. This is like the 3rd time we've talked about Scott Nimmerfro on this show. I think at least the 3rd time. Probably the 4th, maybe? He feels like one of the names that's shown up a lot. Like with Alan Brennert on our our Twilight Zone podcast. Scott Nimmerfro has shown up a lot more than I think anyone else.
Scott was one of the driving forces behind the later seasons of the show. Really good guy. A really good writer at times, depending on what he was delivering. I miss him dearly. Here we go. All Oils Well That Ends Well, which is, God, it sounds so familiar, us doing this episode, right? Almost like we've done it before.
A little backstory on this episode. 2 years ago, Chronicles from the Crypt 2 years ago, Chronicles from the Crypt had been on ice for a while. I had podcast co-hosts who were not able to commit to getting this podcast once a month done. And essentially, we've moved to a twice a month format. But I was unable to find anyone who would be willing to commit to doing the show because it's a time commitment like anything else. But I mean, Father Malone and I were friends, and I approached him because we were already doing CultureCast stuff. And I was like, hey, do you want to pick up where I had left off? And we recorded an episode where we talked about this episode, Oils Well That Ends Well, and Halfway Horrible. And we got to the end of the episode, and we pretty much both said at the same time, we should just restart the show in its entirety.
And we did, and here we are!
2 years later, I think a little over 2 years later, we're finally back at the point where we picked up the show 2 years ago.
The episode that never aired, but here it is now. Oh my God.
Yep. And boy, what a doozy of an episode, isn't it?
Ugh. Yeah, it's not really great.
Hasn't it gotten better in the last 2 years?
It has not. It has, in fact, in some estimation, gotten worse. Oils Well That Ends Well. Okay, now, shockingly, this is adapted from a Tales from the Crypt story issue number 34, Tales from the Crypt, written by Bill Gaines, Al Feldstein. The artwork here was done by George Evans, which is good. Story is almost remarkably exactly the same. They have swapped a male character for a female character, in this case being Priscilla Presley. Follows the original comic pretty to the letter, much to the detriment, because this is not enjoyable. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong. I mean, there are some parts of this episode that are fun. It's nice to see John Kassir in front of the camera. It is.
Yeah. No question. Like, he's...
Right, yeah. I mean, and we're not just saying that because we love John Kassir and he did the intro for our podcast. Genuinely, John Kassir in front of the camera is a welcome addition to this episode. But everything else, for the most part, not great. Lou Diamond Phillips, Lou Diamond Phillips is not a good actor. Like, he's just not. He's okay.
He's okay, but he's...
And Priscilla Presley is great in Naked Gun.
Yeah, the Naked Gun movies. Absolutely. Here, actually, I don't have a problem with her here. She's pretty good, given what she's given.
Yeah. Oh, I wasn't saying she was bad here. I'm saying she's really good in Naked Gun. She's okay in this. But she works better in a purely comedic setting because it allows her to be a little bit more natural. Here, everything feels kind of forced.
Yeah, because it's not good. It's yet another con artist story where nothing new is brought to the table. It's pretty rote. We've seen some episodes recently where you can kind of say, well, we've seen this before, but in this particular case, we definitely have seen this before. Setting and whatever being a little bit different, but, as far as a con artist getting conned, stop doing these. There are so many more interesting avenues they could be exploring, and they just choose not to.
Yeah, the whole con artist thing is getting a little old. I mean, I can think of at least, 2 off the top of my head? The Treat Williams one with the older ladies. And I feel like there's another one I'm forgetting.
The Tim Curry one. That was another one, big old con artist episode.
Right. That was at the beginning of this season, too.
And that was good. That was fun.
That was a great episode. One of the best episodes of the show. I mean, Tim Curry is great.
If you can't top something that previously came in the same season, don't do it. Find some other story.
Yeah. I don't understand that. I don't understand putting something so close to the other, stylistic trope of the episode of the same season that is amazing. I mean, look, it's hindsight, right? The Tim Curry episode is well regarded in the community after the fact. They couldn't have known at the time. But I also don't think that they knew at the time when they were making this episode that it was... I don't think that they thought this was going to be a good episode. It comes at the end of the season 5.
Their thought process was on any of these episodes, because more often than not, we just end up scratching our heads and going, what were they thinking putting this in? This is not great. It's okay. I mean, I don't hate it necessarily. It's just sort of there. It feels more like a shock suspense story than a Tales from the Crypt. There's nothing inherently supernatural going on. It's just a bunch of bad people behaving badly. And then, they all sort of pay the price. And that's fine. Bill Gaines and Al Feldstein wrote the lion's share of the Tales from the Crypt comics. So I'm sure they were constantly trying to find something of interest or something unexplored. Maybe at the time this was one of those things, but certainly episode would not have existed had they not set part of it in a cemetery. I mean, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think the cemetery is kind of that Tales from the Crypt angle for the episode, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't really pay off, other than the fact that characters that we've been convinced are dead, pop back up as it goes on. In this case, being the amazing John Kassir. So we've at least got that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big takeaway for me. I love John Kassir in this episode. I mean, he's barely in it, unfortunately, but he's great. I like him a lot. I mean, obviously, he's the voice of the Cryptkeeper, and he's an amazing voice artist. And an amazing actor. If you haven't seen the remake of Reefer Madness, he's, again, the best part of that movie as well. So
he's really good in that.
Yeah. He's a great comedic actor who has great comedic timing, and he makes this episode worth watching, but he almost is like in the double wraparound. There's like the Cryptkeeper wraparound, and then there's the John Kassir in the episode wraparound as well.
Yeah, his appearance pays off more when the Cryptkeeper is commenting.
Which I thought was really smart.
Yeah, that was fun. But
Yeah.
it's the only amount of fun in the episode. Other than that, we're just dealing with a sort of pseudo-feminist take on a con artist story from the early 90s. It's just kind of boring. The female lead, such as she is not drawn anything more than it's okay for me to be a con artist as well. I don't know. It's deeply boring. It's just boring. That's ultimately it, right? It doesn't achieve anything more than what it set out to achieve, and what it set out to achieve was not that interesting.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it thinks it's telling us a more interesting story than it actually is.
Yeah, which even at the
sense?
time, and this is one episode I remember watching at the time, I thought really? If there's any sort of innovation to it, it's the idea that she's railing against the sort of boys' club in any capacity, and it's not that interesting a take.
No, it's not. And ultimately, with something like this, you need to do something interesting because otherwise you just fall short of the mark, like they did with this episode. It fell short, and it had the opportunity to do something interesting, and it didn't.
It didn't really bring anything new to the table. I mean, it certainly it adapted the original comic book pretty straightforwardly. And if you're going to make it some other thing, like some other point of view, like go with that hardcore, and they did not. It just sort of like swapped one character in for another, played a little bit of lip service to sort of feminism, and then we got what we got. Which is, biters get bit, right? I mean, that's the Rockney O'Bannon idea of the Twilight Zone. The characters who are sort of venal, getting what they deserve. But everyone here is venal. I wasn't rooting for any of them.
No, I wasn't either. I'm right there with you. It is what it is. For the John Kassir bits, it's great. But for everything else, it's Alan Ruck is in this episode, and this is the only episode of Tales from the Crypt he's in. Boy, isn't that kind of depressing?
Very depressing. And his character is named Cardi, who is Scott and I share a mutual friend by the name of Cardi Talkington. A little bit weird to know that a character is named after a friend of mine, and because they say it a couple of times.
Is it kind of weird to see
Cardi,
that?
come on up and out of that grave. So it's a little bit jarring for me knowing who we're talking about, because I've never known anybody else with that name. Doesn't redeem it in any way for anybody who doesn't know these people, Makes it a little bit more fun for me, but that ain't saying much.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you. I mean, a lot of people in this episode deserved a lot better. Not just John Kassir. That's for sure. How did you first get involved with Tales from the Crypt?
It's not a short story, but a fun story. I started out as a theater actor in New York, and made my way into television by winning Star Search as a stand-up comedian back in 1985, and the way that happened was I was doing an off-Broadway show about stand-up comics called Three Guys Naked from the Waist Down, which was it was a three-guy musical of stand-up comics, and think Dreamgirls, but with stand-up comedians, and starred myself along with Scott Bakula and a guy named Jerry Colker, who was who wrote the book and lyrics. The music was by a well-known musical theater actor, Tony Award winner Michael Rupert. And, I played this very dark kind of suicidal, kind of Andy Kaufman-ish type comedian in the show. And they had seen me, some people had seen me from Star Search, and they said, hey, we want you to be on our show. And as you know, it was a brand new show, and I was like, what is this, like, you know, Ted Mack's Amateur Hour? They're like, no, it's, you know, you can, it's, all the comedians are doing it. You can win $100,000. And I went, oh, well, fuck, I'll do it. You know,
Right.
Like, I'm not really a stand-up comic. I'm just doing this as a part in a play. They said, you know, you win $100,000. And I went, oh, yeah, I tell you about my career as a stand-up comic.
Right.
So I went on the show, and, you know, because I didn't really have a lot of material. I had done a lot of street performing and sketch comedy for years, so it wasn't like it was a foreign thing to me. But you know, I had created some of the material that I was doing in the play, in the musical Three Guys. So you know, each week I had to go up there and do, you know, 2.5 minutes of something funny. And so I did a lot of different characters. I had created you know, my persona as a guy who was addicted to television, and I would flip through the channels to different TV shows and that kind of thing. And kind of the idea of growing up through pop culture, through television. Was kind of my material, but I did a lot of voices and characters in my act. And my first series that I got was one called First and 10, which was on HBO as well. And I played a Bulgarian field goal kicker who could kick 60-yard field goals. So he was kind of a funny character named Zagreb Shkeniski. And so HBO knew that I did a bunch of voices and characters and that kind of thing, and asked me to come in and audition for their show Tales from the Crypt. And of course I'm sitting there going, wow, they're making that into a series. I had the comic books as a kid, and it was a big deal, and I was like, this is so cool. I just figured it would be kind of like a cult thing for you know, people that were into it like me. I mean, I loved the Universal horror monster movies.
Right.
And so I went in down to Kevin Yeager's studio where they were holding the auditions, and Kevin was, you know, trying to find a voice that matched, you know, the puppet that he was creating. And, you know, saw that he had all these rotting teeth and holes in his throat, and he was this cackling bag of bones. And they gave us the copy, and the copy was all these, you know, ridiculous puns, which I loved. I could see some of the other guys that were auditioning were going, oh, my God, this stuff's terrible. How do you say this stuff?
Right.
And I'm sitting there going, you guys don't get it. He loves saying this stuff, you know. So I went in and did it for Kevin, and he was, you know, he was like, wow, that's exactly what I'm, you know, I couldn't even have thought something so perfect for it. So the next day he had me auditioning in a, you know, they were up in their sound stages where they were shooting the show already, and they hadn't done any of the Cryptkeeper stuff yet, but Joel Silver and Richard Donner were up there in some little trailer office while they were, you know, getting the show up and running. And so I did it for them in that office. And you know, obviously they were really big guys to do anything for, but to do that for them in their office was a lot of fun. And they're like, great, we'll see you on the set. And, you know, of course I thought they were just pulling my leg, you know, or, you know, a lot of people go, okay, that was great, man. Great, we'll see you, you know.
Wait to hear from us.
You never hear from them again, yeah. But, you know, and that was 1988, I guess, when we started working on it. The show was on the air in 1989. And, you know, been doing it ever since.
Yeah. When you got the part of the Cryptkeeper, I mean, did you get the sense that the show was going to become kind of like a pop culture icon and that it was going to run for 7 seasons?
You can never tell about anything. You know, the things I thought would have been the biggest projects that I worked on, you know, very often became nothing, you know.
Right.
You just don't know. It's, you know, I've been doing this for 33 years, and there's, you know, I can count probably projects on one hand that you would even know the names of, you know, out of 33 years of shows and performances and plays and that kind of stuff. And, you know, so especially since it was such a, you know, I mean, it was a controversial comic book as a kid. I mean, you know, I had to hide mine because, they were deemed to be causing juvenile delinquency in kids and stuff. Of course, it was ridiculous. But Tales from the Crypt comic books are the reason why comic books have coding on them, for age appropriateness. And before that, they didn't have that. And so, and HBO wasn't as in every household, in as many households as it is now. First and 10, which I did for 6 years, which was a great series, launched the careers of a lot of different people, including myself. Was seen by a certain number of people, but it wasn't a mainstream show because HBO was maybe in 20% of households.
Right.
But Tales from the Crypt was so popular, that, people were going to people's houses that had HBO, so they would have Tales from the Crypt parties or whatever. And, so it was a very popular show. It was an expensive show to do, too. Every year somebody else had to come up with some more cash to supplement it to get it on the air in hopes that they would make their money back in syndication,
Mm-hmm.
But, which is maybe one of the reasons why, they didn't jump back into doing more in the last number of years. And then, of course, the rights ran out, so the Gaines family haven't let go of the rights to allow for more to be made. So, at least not through these guys in this particular style of show. So, so there's really no way to tell that was going to happen. The show's more popular now than it ever was. And, the show was popular back then, but there's more of a fan base for it now, the kids that grew up with it. And if you had asked me if kids were watching it back in the day, I would have said no way, with the language and nudity and graphic violence and that kind of thing. I thought there's no way kids are watching this. Of course, I was completely wrong. All kids, as many kids as could get their hands on it or sneak down to watch it. Kids young adults that were kids at the time it came out were now telling me, yeah, it's the only show my whole family watched together. Or, yeah, my parents wouldn't let me watch it, but on the weekends when I was at my grandmother's, we'd watch it together. Or, my parents would, it scared the crap out of me. My parents would threaten to make me watch it if I didn't do my homework. Or my parents knew I loved it, so they wouldn't let me watch it if I didn't do my homework.
Right.
So, it became, a very iconic show for all the right reasons, the same way that the comic book did. I'm happy to be part of that. Obviously, the voice is the pitch guy for it. I'm the front man for the show, so I get a lot of attention about it. But of course, it was also produced by incredible producers, and the effects were done by incredible people. The puppet itself was created by one of the best creature makers ever, Kevin Yeager, and controlled by a fantastic team of puppeteers. So there's all those elements to it.
It had all the right parts to make it a success.
Oh yeah, those guys are the biggest producers in the business. The partners that bought the rights to the comic books at the time to make it were Joel Silver, who did all the Lethal Weapons and Superman and Matrix, and and of course Richard Donner, who directed the Lethal Weapon movies and Superman, and Walter Hill did 48 Hours and all these great movies, and Bob Zemeckis, of course, and you don't even need to list his credits, everything from Back to the Future to Forrest Gump, and David Giler, who had produced Alien. So, these were the producers, and they had to get a lot of favors to get the show made, and they didn't get a lot of favors. All those stars that worked on that show worked for scale, and people, they got these great directors to come in and work on it. And then there were a lot of actors and people in the business who, hadn't really made a mark for themselves as directors, wanted to come in and direct an episode too. It was kind of a playground for that. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Michael J. Fox and Tom Hanks and Michael Keaton and, all these different people came in and directed episodes. So it's kind of...
So speaking of the Cryptkeeper's voice, which you did a little bit. What, aside from seeing kind of what they were going for with the puppet, what other kind of influences did you draw from to create the voice?
Well, obviously the, if you go back to the drawings in the comic books and stuff, it's like every time his mouth is open, there's like drool, from lip to lip, that kind of artistic style that was used in the comic books back then is you see it in every kind of horror now. So it had texture to it. So it felt like the voice needed to have texture to it. And, the idea of making him funny and fun and gleeful and laughing at his own jokes was an idea that I immediately had. And, so I'm thinking what better laugh to emulate than, some kind of, chalkboard scream, than something similar to the Wicked Witch of the West. So I obviously did my own kind of take on that. And then, he's the host of the show, so I thought back, okay, who are the great hosts of horror and, suspense, and you're thinking Rod Serling and Alfred Hitchcock on his show, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and, these kind of things. And so he had to be that kind of storyteller and draw you in with his, kind of macabre humor. So, went along that line, and then of course they were jokes, so we had to have, some kind of, stand-up kind of feel to it, and obviously having done some stand-up, that was, in my wheelhouse, but also, thinking along the lines of the best old, joke, the timing of the old, joke tellers, whether it was Henny Youngman or Rodney Dangerfield or Johnny Carson or these kind of guys, So those were the elements that I needed to, to bring to the character, and those were the elements that seemed to meld really well with, what the choices that I made seemed to meld really well with what everybody was thinking.
Speaking of your character, how did the filming work? Were you on set, or was it just synced up afterwards?
Usually they were already shooting the episode when they wrote the wraparounds. They wanted the wraparounds to fit the tone of whatever they were, doing. Kevin Yeager, directed all the sequences with the puppets because it's a pretty involved, thing, is the automated, puppet that worked, took 5-6 people to work, depending on whether you had feet involved or not. And took 2-3 people just to make the face move. 2, I think, to move the cheeks, eyes, and other exclamations in the face, and then 1 to move the jaw and lips. And then, a puppeteer that worked the head and one of the hands, and then somebody that worked the other hand. So that's 5 right there. And then if they had his feet moving and stuff, there was we had this great actress, this short woman that would come in there and stick her feet in there with the Cryptkeeper feet on. So, that was pretty involved. So they had to be able to coordinate with my performance. So Kevin and I would go into the studio and do 1 or 2 episodes, depending on what they needed at the time, and just do some different versions of it and have some fun. And sometimes they would videotape me just to get us some, physicality. And the puppeteers would coordinate to the the playback, the same way that you would when you're doing a rock video or the music playback. And so they could coordinate everything. But they got to be so good that, sometimes we would have to do interviews about an upcoming season or one of the movies or that kind of thing. And I would be off camera answering the questions, and the puppet would be on camera, and the puppeteers would be watching me and taking their cues off of what I was saying, and they'd be just a tiny fraction behind what I was doing, but you wouldn't notice it on camera. And they were keeping up with me like in real time. It was pretty amazing. Pretty amazing job that they did. And sadly, Van Snowden, who was the lead puppeteer on that puppet, died of cancer a couple years back. But really talented. But everybody else in that crew were made, some of the best in the business and working some of the biggest movies around Jurassic Park and stuff like that, making dinosaur puppets move and that kind of stuff. They're all, gifted puppeteers. So, that's how you would do it. If there was, sometimes if there was somebody on set, like whether it was Whoopi Goldberg or Arnold Schwarzenegger or that kind of thing, I'd be on set for them to play off camera because, otherwise they would have to play to a playback, which doesn't have a lot of, give them any kind of leniency in timing. Plus, you don't have to put a whole mess of puppeteers together just to do a playback. Them to have nothing to play to. So, there's a camera actor for them to play to as well in a number of situations. That was always a good way to work. But I really was I had carte blanche to go down to the set anytime I really wanted. If I wanted to go watch them record or shoot. My parents were in town and never had seen anything really shoot live. I took them down. Well, they were shooting Death of Some Salesman, and Tim Curry and Ed Begley were shooting that episode, and it was Tim Curry played the daughter, the mother, and the father in that episode. It just brilliantly. I can't remember if he won an Emmy or was nominated for an Emmy for that, but he certainly should have been. And he was dressed up like the daughter that day. They were shooting the daughter's stuff. And he was just hysterical. I mean, he looked great. My parents couldn't believe their eyes. But the attention to detail, they had given him, I don't know if you'd ever have seen his feet, but they had given him hammer toes and everything else. It was very funny.
As the attention to detail, right, for the show, just...
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's one of the reasons why the show's so great. The opening sequence is done with, at that time, pretty cutting-edge effects. Obviously Robert Zemeckis has always been into cutting-edge effects and used a number of them in the Tales from the Crypt episodes that he directed, and also in the opening sequence, some of the same effects that he used in stuff like Forrest Gump. The opening sequence goes from a model to a model staircase into a real foyer that they built that was a set, and goes to the bookcase, down a CGI'd staircase into another set, and it's pretty seamless. You can't really tell. So they did a pretty amazing job. It was a playground for top people in the business to do their thing. I'm glad to have been a part of it.
You mentioned that you kind of worked on set with some different guests. What was it like to work with some of the biggest names in Hollywood at the time?
Well, it's always an interesting thing. That show was a lot of fun, so people are always there to have a good time.
Right.
I've done, obviously I work on camera as well, and work, some of the voiceover stuff that I've done has also been with some of the biggest people. But as far as working with people in this business, I worked with a lot of them. Jack the Giant Slayer was one of the most recent projects where I worked with amazing, big movie actors. I played a, two-headed giant with Bill Nye, who's one of my favorite British actors. People are, you mean Bill Nye the Science Guy? No, not Bill Nye the Science Guy. Bill Nye, Underworld, Love Actually, he's just one of the best actors in the world. And we played a two-headed giant together, so I, was pretty much attached to Bill for 4 months. And, playing opposite Stanley Tucci and Ewan McGregor and Nicholas Hoult and, Ian McShane and all these great actors. And, it varies. Some people are just, as amazingly giving and great to work with, like Bill was, they could be. And then there are other people, they are, professional, but they don't really, aren't really that invested in getting to know you or that kind of thing. You can even work for them a long time, and it may be like that, or a short time. And some people will just treat you like you're one of their oldest friends immediately. So it's, there's been some experiences where I've worked with people that were just complete assholes, but you would expect that on some level from, from any business that you work in. And so it's, there are prima donnas in her business, and those are usually people on their way down. But I did
That's
an
the
NCIS
way, I would say that's
earlier.
the way it is with everybody, right?
Again?
That's the way it is with a lot of people. It's not just Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly. And like I worked on NCIS beginning of the year. Had a really great partner. I was supposed to be old friends with Robert Wagner. I had never met Robert Wagner before in my life, and he treated me like I had known him for years. He was just one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. It was a great experience, and we had a lot of fun shooting the episode. So, as were all the actors on that show. Mark Harmon, runs a tight ship over there, and he treats their people really well. So, it's tough. It's tough being, when you're on a series, you're in, it's your game, and you're part of the game, and everybody treats you a certain way, and then you come in as a guest star, and you're expected to just come in, deliver, and leave, and very often the stuff you're doing is not very colorful, and sometimes you have to have, close relationships with the people you're working opposite, and they're, you never get to know them even for a second, and that kind of thing. You don't really get much rehearsal in television and that kind of thing. So it's a difficult task. It can be. And then you walk on a set like something like NCIS, and everybody treats you like you've been on the show all along, and they're really cool. And it's not that the other people aren't doing their job. It's just that's not the way they work, or they're just don't have the time for it, and that kind of thing. So it can be very difficult in that situation. And I've been on both ends of it. I always went out of my way to try to make the guest stars, when I was on a series regular, trying to make the guest stars feel like they were welcome so that they could do their best work, And so it can be a weird situation depending. Newer shows are a little more uptight because they're trying to stay on the air, and they're working towards making sure everything's right. The director can change all that too. It can be a good experience, a bad experience, depending on the director. But Tales from the Crypt always had big stars on it, and they were always really cool and came ready to have a good time, and they were always really ready to have a lot of fun, and we always did. I've shot stuff where I've worked on it for months, like Reefer Madness, where we shot up in Vancouver for 3 months. Working with fun people like Steven Weber and Kristen Bell and Alan Cumming and Hannah Gasteyer, and then of course some of the who were the original cast members from the play, myself and Christian Campbell and Bob Torty, of course. And we're up there just on location somewhere having a great time together, and we're all becoming close friends, and and that's what makes a movie like that become special. So you can tell that the people were having fun making Tales from the Crypt because the show emulated that. It's usually where it starts with what the people bring to the set that day.
And everyone that I've spoken to from the show, mostly just guests who were on the show, have all been really cool and super, nice to talk to, and everybody seemed pretty awesome. So I can imagine, I guess that was kind of just a product of the set, or, that's kind of what they were going for with the show. So
yeah, it's not every day you get to walk on and you go, okay, in this scene you're going to be wearing fangs and ripping his neck out. It's like
right.
I shot one of the episodes myself, Oils Well That Ends Well, which is the last episode in season 6, which was supposed to be the very last episode of the series, but we wound up having a kind of a surprise pickup. The season 7 that shot in London because they wanted to be involved somehow. Somebody over there wanted to be involved and came up with the money to get it together for another season. And that was with Lou Diamond Phillips and Priscilla Presley and Noel Willingham, who was in the Good Morning Vietnam, and Rory Calhoun who was a big TV star, a big cowboy star on TV back in the day, and Alan Ruck, from Ferris Bueller's Day Off and that kind of thing. And we just had a blast. I had to, I got to be shot and fall. First I had to be buried in a in a casket, which was no easy task. Lou Diamond Phillips was like, had to dig me out. And so we were having a lot of laughs. He's still one of the nicest guys I've ever met. I've run into him recently, and he's still as nice as could be. And, he's digging me out of a grave. I was like, okay, when after you close the lid, they got to be rolling camera, and you're going to throw the dirt back on, and then you're going to dig it off, and you're going to let me get out of here really quick, because I don't know how long I'm going to be able to stand, especially when I start hearing the dirt thrown on top of the casket, which was not an easy thing to do. But, it was fun because they were doing it as an homage, my character, to Tales from the Cryptkeeper popping up out of the casket in the opening sequence. So it was kind of like I popped up like that. In retrospect, I should have popped up with that laugh, but didn't want to make it too obvious. You know what I mean? Later on, I do a little bit of a laugh to make it a little obvious, but popping up out of that casket and stuff. I mean, who gets to do that stuff, And there's all kinds of fun prosthetics and that kind of thing. So it's a fun thing to work on.
Now, did you enjoy, because you mentioned the episode that you're in front of the camera, did you enjoy doing that more than the voice, or was it just like a wholly different experience?
Different. There's so many differences between on camera and off camera. It's all acting, and I get to play a lot of parts I won't get to play on camera, because you're limited by how you look, your size, your physicality, your age, your race. There's so many different things that limit you on camera as far as the type of parts you can play. Of course, there are so many things that you can do on camera with your acting that you don't get to do off camera. Obviously on camera and on stage or wherever you're working, where you're being seen, you're using other skills that you don't get to use with voiceover work. So there's that. So that's obviously more challenging and more fun for that reason. When you have voiceover, you get to play, I get to play, villains and creatures and kids and, animals and things that aren't even human. And then, of course, but it's difficult because I don't have a visualization to work with. I have to create everything in my mind that's going to be there beforehand. A lot of times they'll write some physical description in the script, sometimes not. Sometimes you get to see what the character looked like. Sometimes they make the character look like what you sound like. So, there's all those different elements. So it's always different. But the voiceover, people go, oh, I could do that. It's easy. You're just reading and blah, blah, blah. Well, no, that's not true. Because, you're creating a whole world around you and bringing that to life with the way you're reacting and the way you're speaking and the choices that you make get you or not get you the job, just like anything else. So, they're both challenging and they're both fun for other reasons, and they're both, one great voiceover job can be better than, a lot of the on-camera jobs I've done, and then one on-camera job can be better than, all the voiceover jobs I've ever done. So it's each one's a different situation. As far as Tales from the Crypt, obviously playing the Cryptkeeper is, about as fun as you can get for that show. So on camera, yeah, I had a blast doing it, but it's, it's not, you can't compare it with, getting to play the Cryptkeeper,
So in kind of in your body of work, does the Cryptkeeper stand out as kind of your masterstroke in your own mind?
Well, it depends on in what part of my work you're talking about. In terms of iconic characters, as an actor, especially a character actor like myself, you don't work so hard to strive to, you don't strive to make yourself famous as much as you do the characters that you play. At least to me. Becoming famous is part of getting work in our business, sadly. It's part of it, but, and getting to be known as much as you can helps you get work. So there is that element of it, but at the same time, it's a double-edged sword because it also makes you more recognizable as you and undermines your ability to make people believe the characters you play. And that's why people are so impressed by somebody who's a big star who's able to, create characters that people get lost in. They also resist seeing people that they fall in love with as who who they are on camera, like a Julia Roberts or something like that, they resist seeing them playing other parts that aren't them, that don't emulate them. And so that's tough. It's kind of a double-edged sword for them too on that level. But for me, having the ability to get lost in the characters, I probably have done a bunch of things that you've seen and you don't remember that I'm on them because you didn't know who it was me. Not that you didn't know. If you saw a lot of me now, you would say, oh yeah, that was that guy and that and that guy and that. Whether it was Shemp in the Three Stooges or Ralph in Reefer Madness or Zagreb on First and 10 or these characters. They were very specific characters that I was able to bring to life for a long time and be convincing in. But none of them, and also, playing on stage is a whole nother story because you get to do that 8 performances a week if you're doing it off Broadway or Broadway. And getting to do that kind of thing is an amazing experience as well in front of a live audience. And then you really get to delve into a character and really get to work something and work with an actor and rehearse over a long period of time so that you can bring it to life every night over and over and over again with something new. So in terms of those strokes, in terms of the work, there are things certainly that challenged me more than Tales from the Crypt, that used more of my skills that I've worked on and more of my talents that I was given to do. And so I would, probably say, something that I did on stage might be more of my master stroke in terms of, what I felt I'm able to do as an actor. But certainly Tales from the Crypt is my master stroke in terms of iconic characters. There's, nothing that's lasted that long, that's become that popular in its genre, that is so recognizable worldwide or appreciated by fans that love it. There's no other piece of work that I've done that somebody comes up to me and goes, oh man, that character that you did is the reason that I follow that genre. And that happens with Tales from the Crypt all the time. It's like, oh man, I heard your voice come on the TV, I came running. And, I watched Tales from the Crypt because I want to watch the Cryptkeeper. And, I love the Cryptkeeper and I loved your voice in it and I loved that it got me hooked on horror. And now I've been a horror fan my whole life because of character and you and what you did in it and stuff like that. And of course, it's not all me. It's a collaborative art, which is what acting is a collaborative art, especially filmmaking. You have a certain pride about doing something like that for all those reasons, especially that you collaborated with some of the best people in the business to make something special. So I certainly don't take all the credit for, the Cryptkeeper or Tales from the Crypt, but I certainly am proud of my work in it. And as a result, it's something that is more come to be part of the definition of me rather than I tried to make it to define me. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah. Because it was placed on me. I just did my work and it happened to happen that way. That's all luck. It's a lot of hard work from a lot of different people, but as far as it finding its home and getting on the air and the right people seeing it and being on the air long enough for people to see it and then for it to be something that everybody winds up it resonating with a lot of different people and it's still being around so that even another generation know what it is and that kind of stuff. That's in the fates of the gods, Some people are good at that. Some people, that's what their talent are. Somebody like Madonna, her talent is reinventing herself over and over and over again. So everybody continues to know who she is and, appreciate what talent she has at that moment and, that kind of thing. So, and not that she's the most talented person in the world. I'm sure a lot of people would not think that, but she certainly has that talent figured out more than most people do. And as a result, it's appreciated for all of her talents.
So I guess kind of speaking about the show as a whole, what is, and you've gotten this question a million times, I'm sure, but I'm going to ask it anyways. What is your favorite episode of the show? Or not even favorite, just one that stands out to you in your mind as one that is, I don't know. Well,
there definitely are some episodes that stand out in my mind as some of my favorites, and some of the earlier ones certainly are great because they were directed by Bob Zemeckis and Walter Hill and and Richard Donner. You know, I mean, they're some of the best directors in movie making, and of course they had at their fingertips, you know, more of what they wanted, and they knew what they were trying to bring across and that kind of thing. They weren't just a guest director coming in for a week and doing something. And then, of course, Gil Adler, who was one of the writer, producer, directors of Tales from the Crypt, who ran that show for many years, also directed one of my favorites, which was Death of Some Salesman, the one that I mentioned earlier with Tim Curry. It's just so well done. It's a comic book. It's so great. But the first season, there was an episode that Walter Hill directed, The Man Who Was Deaf, with William Sattler as an executioner. They abolished the death penalty in his state, so he goes around as a vigilante, you know, flying people in their hot tubs and stuff. And then he gets caught, and of course, they reinstate the death penalty for him. And it was just really stylistic. He had, you know, Walter Hill, who likes to use Ry Cooder a lot for his music in his movies and stuff, got Ry Cooder to do the music for it, and it had a real style to it with the music and the way that the character talked to the camera and all these great aspects of it. And William Sattler was really great in it, as he was in Demon Knight. And, you know, it's just classic Tales from the Crypt. And then when you come in the end, it's Cryptkeeper sitting in a chair, in an electric chair, frying himself and getting off on it. So that's, yeah, it all just really has a great style to it. Richard Donner's episode, you know, his first episode that All Through the House, of course, that Bob Zemeckis directed. People tell me that's their favorite more than any other episode. I don't know, maybe there's something twisted about putting Christmas together with horror, but it's classic slasher. You know, classic, don't go into that room, don't go outside, you know, kind of, you know, it's just really well done. So that one is, it was not always one of, you know, it doesn't stand out as one of my favorites. Obviously, it's one of my favorites because it's just really, really well done in one of the first episodes. And Bob Zemeckis can do no wrong in my eyes. But, and the casting was great. Oh, that was his wife, by the way. I played the actress that played the female lead in that, along with Larry Drake. But the other of the first episodes was Dig That Cat, He's Real Gone, which was with Joey Pants, you know, playing the guy who had 9 lives because he had the spleen of a cat or whatever implanted, and which was classic. But my favorite Richard Donner, which I loved, but my favorite Richard Donner episode and one of my all-time favorite episodes was Ventriloquist Dummy. That was with Don Rickles and Bobcat Goldthwait, where Morty, the ventriloquist dummy, turns out to be Don Rickles' Siamese twin attached to his hand.
Yeah.
Who's a psychopath. The dummy's a psychopath, and it's an amazing episode. I used to, every once in a while, just a few times, I got an opportunity to go into Richard Donner's office there on the Warner Brothers lot, and he had Morty in a little glass case, the puppet they used in the episode, and I would laugh. I would go in there and I'd be like, "Oh my God, so creepy." Don Rickles was so good in that too. But that's a great episode. A lot of good episodes. You know, I mean, some of the ones are more cartoony, some of the ones are more dark, some of the ones are more thriller-esque. You know, I mean, they all have a different tone to them depending on the story and the director and the script. But it's like the difference between. I'll wrap this up by talking about the difference between Demon Knight and Bordello of Blood. You know, they're both great movies for different reasons, but some people who like more of the cartoony comic book kind of feel gravitate towards Bordello of Blood, and some of the people that like the more dark and creature effects and that kind of stuff are attracted to Demon Knight. Me personally, I like Demon Knight. I just thought it was incredible. You know, great villain by Billy Zane. You know, William Sattler was great, and all the actors were good in it. And Ernest Dickerson just did a great job of shooting it. So it's a great movie. So I mean, it's, you know, a lot of years of a great property that they eked a lot out of, and you know, a lot of people ask me why we don't do more, and there's a number of different reasons. The main reason is they don't have the rights to it anymore to do it. Somebody else.
Which is too bad.
Yeah. Somebody else has the rights to it. Whether they'll ever get anything done with it or not, who knows. But they wouldn't be able to use this Cryptkeeper or do this style of show because that was done by the other guys that owned the rights to it at that time. They would have to come up with their own thing. But, you know, the property is a great property. You would hope that somebody would do something great with it either way. And, you know, you never know. Maybe in the future the Cryptkeeper will show up in something else or be back. It'd certainly be a shame if he didn't. But in the meantime, you got 93, 94 episodes, I think, to watch.
And three movies.
Right. So, you know.
Yeah.
There you go.
More than enough stuff.
Hey, thank you very much, Chris. I so appreciate your time.
I just love how your hair is grown out. A little scream rinsing conditioner, and it'll look faboo. If you don't look dead, we don't look dead. Oh, hello, kiddies. You're right on time for your appointment. You know, it was always one of my ghouls in death to open my own scare salon. Now let's see. A few shrieks in your hair would look good. A bouffant would look even better. Or maybe you'd like to try tonight's dye fashion statement. It's a nasty nugget that asks the question, zombie or not zombie? I call it halfway horrible.
So Halfway Horrible is directed by Gregory it's directed by Gregory Wyden, written by Gregory Wyden. It stars Clancy Brown and Martin Kove. And Clancy Brown is the owner of an undersea hamburger restaurant. No, he's not. He's not Mr. Krabs. Well, he is Mr. Krabs, but he's not Mr. Krabs in this episode. In this episode, he's a dickhead pharmaceutical character. This is a shittier version of Forever Ambergris. It really is. There's no other way to describe this episode other than a shittier version.
No, not in the same season, too. Like, I'm shocked that this occurred.
It's really surprising because we've had 2 episodes following up 2 great episodes that have been almost carbon copies of the previous episodes in the season, and these don't work.
This one certainly doesn't, and it's a real drag because, you know, we say a lot like about an actor who is done a disservice by this is the only episode they get to do. Clancy Brown is one of my favorite actors of all time. What a fucking good performer. Just given really nothing to do here. As you mentioned, this was written and directed by Gregory Wyden, who wrote Highlander, the feature film that I think most people would recognize Clancy Brown from early on, where he played the Kurgan. In that film, the episode itself is based off of not a Tales from the Crypt episode, but Vault of Horror number 36, which was written and drawn by a guy by the name of Sid Check. First time I've seen him in any of the Tales from the Crypt family, or EC Comics, rather. The story is almost exactly the same. No real variation on it. If you've got an episode and you got Clancy Brown as your fucking lead and it's not interesting, you got a big goddamn problem.
But hey, Cheech Marin is in this episode.
Sure is, and Martin Kove sweep the leg. There's a lot of talent on display. Just given nothing to do. The same old story. We got a new drug, and it's based on a voodoo thing, and, you know, here we go. Undead.
Oh, and hey, Costas Mandylor is in this episode.
Oh boy, Costas Mandylor.
Hey, he's in Saw.
He certainly is in Saw.
And that's it.
Well, I mean, he was in Mobsters.
And Saw.
He was also in Mafia. Jane Austen's Mafia, for some of you.
Oh, that's right.
He's good in that.
I always forget he was in that movie.
Yeah, man. Squeezing the olive oil out of an olive.
He was also in Saw.
I did not know that.
I don't think most people know him from anything other than Saw.
Probably not, but people have an attention span of a Cocker Spaniel these days.
That's true. But he's barely even in this episode.
Yeah, very infrequently. You know, mainly what we get is the awesome Clancy Brown doing his best to enliven a script that is not in any way worthy of him. It's not good, man. It's not good.
No,
I'm so tired of
the ending.
Let's go to the voodoo trope once again.
What is with the ending of this episode?
Oh, it's terrible. I think that's what you're asking.
But I didn't understand it.
He fucking...
So he has a bad side that he wanted to preserve with Zygrot?
It is Zygrot, isn't it?
I mean, I don't know. I forget what it's called exactly.
Might as well be Zygrot.
Or Tenafly Viper, or anything.
Zygrot B. Fiddle faddle.
Yeah, there's a waste of Clancy Brown's time. Again, this is one of those episodes where our biggest complaint ultimately comes down to, you had Clancy Brown for one episode, and this is that episode.
Here it is. Imagine him in something like Three's a Crowd. Oh my God, he would have knocked it out of the goddamn park.
But not this one.
No, certainly not. I honestly don't know where to go, like critically here. Like, it's just something I watched when it aired, and I felt myself forced to watch it again, and now I never want to watch it again. And I like Greg Wyden. Like, I mentioned he did Highlander. He also wrote and directed a film called... I'm going to forget the actual title because the original title was so much better. He wrote a movie called God's Army that ended up being... God, help me here, Chris. With Christopher Walken. It's about angels fighting one another.
Never seen it.
No.
Never seen it.
The something or other. Christopher Walken, Eric Stoltz, Elias
Is it the
Koteas.
one where on the cover it has like Christopher Walken's face?
Yes.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, but I've never seen it.
It's fun. It's a fun movie. Greg Wyden, interesting fellow. He wrote Backdraft.
The Prophecy.
The Prophecy. What a garbage title. Greg Wyden was a Chicago firefighter and ended up getting injured on the job and wrote a script about it. And that script ended up being Backdraft, in addition to Highlander and The Prophecy and this particular episode. Interesting cat, good thinker, kind of fell into the trap of let's just adapt this as it was and not, look beyond and what the ramifications were, what it would have been in 1994 or 5 when this came out. Like, it's a failing, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's not great. And again, I think the biggest issue that I have is that Clancy Brown is criminally underused.
And that's most of Clancy Brown's entire career, honestly.
But it was Zim. Yeah, Zim. I love him in Starship Troopers.
Oh, he's so
in this,
good.
No. In this, not at all.
What's funny is I grew up watching Clancy Brown in the movie Highlander, playing the Kurgan, who was a massive figure in the film. And years and years ago, this is like 1995 maybe, I went to a comic book convention in Los Angeles at the Shrine Auditorium. And as I was wending my way through the crowd, I actually collided with Clancy Brown. And he just said, "Oh, excuse me." But I realized at that moment that I'm actually taller than him, and it completely destroyed my worldview.
I'm taller than the villain from the Highlander? How could this be?
But, he's good here. That's the only thing I can recommend about the episode is how good Clancy Brown is. But then I would encourage you to go watch him in virtually anything else.
Not this.
No, not this. Stay away. Look, even the makeup is okay. It's not that great. It's, serviceable. And please stop doing voodoo episodes. They're so goddamn boring.
Yeah, the voodoo episodes really just feel cheap at this point and tropey, and I'm done with them. I'm really done with them.
Hopefully we won't get another.
Weird voodoo things. Voodoo is weird. Okay, fine, whatever.
Sure.
You've had your fun show. Give it a rest with the voodoo.
Make it about Scientology or something. I don't know. Something new and uninteresting.
Well, yeah, voodoo is just, again, jungle voodoo too. Good Lord. Then there was the episode with James Remar with voodoo. There was the episode with the disembodied head of that guy in voodoo. Like, there's so many voodoo episodes of this show.
Yeah.
Forever Ambergris.
The really good one with Lloyd Bridges. Not Lloyd Bridges. Beau Bridges.
Is that voodoo? Oh, yeah, that's right.
It is. It ends up being a fake out, but yeah, it's sort of predicated on voodoo. Like, at least that was forward-thinking. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with the supernatural aspect of it, if there is one to begin with.
Yeah, no, that episode is the best voodoo episode of the show, and they use voodoo as a trope, like a fake-out.
It's almost a joke that they're doing, and it's just sort of like a fake-out, exactly. Ah, well.
Oil's well that ends well, as they always say.
In the words of Ed Wood, the next one will be better.
Yep. All right, so on the next episode of Chronicles from the Crypt, we're going to be talking about the final episode of Season 5, Till Death Do We Part, and because this season had an uneven number of episodes, we're also going to be bringing you our bonus episode at the same time, where we're talking about the second Tales from the Crypt film, Bordello of Blood. It stars Dennis Miller.
Oh, Dennis Miller's so funny. Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, Dennis Miller's not funny.
No, man, he's garbage.
That movie's pretty bad, too.
It's not good, and it's kind of crazy.
It makes Demon Knight look like Citizen Kane.
I'm going to do my best to find the original script and read it before we do it, because that was written in the 70s by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale when they were trying to force their way into Hollywood. So I imagine that script is very funny and bizarre, and what we got was forced and bad.
Yeah. Bordello of Blood, if you haven't seen it, watch it before our episode, because you're in for a ride if you haven't gotten a chance to see it yet, because it is not good. And, it's not like the next Tales from the Crypt movie afterwards anyone even remembered as Tales from the Crypt. So
here we go.
Demon Knight and Bordello of Blood are kind of it.
Yeah, unfortunately. What a legacy.
Legacy it is. So until then, where can people find you, Father Malone?
Check me out over on my YouTube channel, Odd5 Films, OUGHTFIVFILMS. Also, listen to me over on Dreams for Sale, the Twilight Zone 85 podcast. And on occasion, you can hear me guest hosting once a month over on the Culturecast.
That's right. You can find me over at the Culturecast, but more than likely just hit me up on Twitter, Casualty_Chris. Chronicles FTC on Twitter is where you can find us, chroniclesfromthecrypt.com as well. Big thanks as always to John Kassir for the intro to the podcast, and we'll catch you on the next episode, kiddies.